amigos, sobre el destino secreto de América se ha hablado mucho en los círculos de la conspiración. Nosotros siempre hemos recomendado varios libros de Tom Horn al respecto, sobre todo el del ascenso de Apolión 2012, que publicamos, fue el primer libro de Tom Horn que publicamos en el blog de Fritz Springmeier en español en Bligo. En este blog no está en Patreon actualmente, pero los críticos de los libros de la conspiración del círculo del cinturón bíblico norteamericano lo tienen en muy alta estima como una de las piedras angulares de explicaciones sobre la labor y la misión de la francmasonería en América. Ahora, con esta tremenda explicación que viene en el video de a continuación, de parte del mismo autor Tom Horn, que hemos tenido sus libros, incluso el de la Profecía de Ajenjo me lo pasó un patrocinador, por lo cual agradezco. Impresionante libro también. Se da también el libro del destino secreto de América, tal cual el nombre, de otro autor, que esta vez es Manly P. Hall, que lo publicó mucho antes. Se habla de cuál es el destino secreto del Gran Sello de los Estados Unidos y de América. Se confluyen las fuentes y se unen las piezas del rompecabezas, y realmente es impresionante cuál es realmente el destino pagano francmasónico estadounidense y mundial, incrustado en los símbolos ocultistas, en el diseño de Washington y sobre todo en el Gran Sello de los Estados Unidos. Sin más, los dejo con Tom Horn sobre su nuevo libro Zeitgeist 2025, impresionante. Espero que me apoyen en Patreon. Agradezco como siempre a los suscriptores y recuerden que estamos en este blog Fritz Springmeier en español, subiendo los videos poco a poco. Saludos y los dejo con Tom Horn.
But guess what else the Essenes prophesied for this period of time leading up to 2025? The rise of Islam, when Islam didn't even exist. They predicted it, that they would be instigators of the end times. And they actually name Hamas, which also did not exist. Again, naming that by name as people who are going to play a role in the end time instigation leading up to the Battle of Armageddon. So I would tell people, definitely get Josh's book, definitely read Zeitgeist 2025, because this is really cutting edge. This is not warmed over pablum. This is really kind of edgy, breaking news, if you will, having to do with end times Bible prophecy. I mean, there is probably more than any book I have ever written to go peek behind the veil, right, at what was going on in early American history. Most Americans, certainly most Christians, don't know that as many as 44 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence were Freemasons. Not Freemasons like you might think of them today. These were men who were being heavily influenced by European Freemasonry. And I'll tell you why. Because in Europe at that time, there was this idea that had been put forward by Sir Francis Bacon. He wrote a book that became very popular called The New Atlantis. It was a utopian novel. But what did this book imagine? Well, his thesis, if you will, was that at one time Atlantis was real, had been written about by Plato and Critias and Timaeus, like 300 years before Christ, and that this society had prospered and done fabulous because it was an occult democracy. And meaning by that they were working in tandem with the ancient gods. And so long as they honored the ancient gods, the gods in turn worked with them to establish this great, powerful nation. Once they turned their back on the gods, they started falling into decay, and finally they're swallowed up, according to Plato, beneath the sea. Well, Bacon's book imagined the creation of a new Atlantis, thus the title of the book. We're going to build an occult democracy that works in harmony with these ancient supernatural entities. And by honoring and blessing them, they're going to turn and give us their energy, and they're going to help us. Which, by the way, is why all throughout the U.S. capital city, every time a cornerstone was laid, you see guys like George Washington, a 33rd degree Freemason with his full Masonic garb, the all-seeing eye of Horus Osiris, is on his chest. And they are specifically waiting until astronomical alignments with Virgo Isis, the sister wife of Osiris, which is very much incorporated on the Great Seal of the United States, until we are in conjunction with certain alignments. And many historians, including Freemason historians, 33rd degree Freemasons, have written that that was being done because we wanted to make sure that we were bringing into existence buildings and structures and streets and the layout and everything else at a time that would be pleasing to the gods of antiquity. Now, anybody who thinks that I'm making some of that stuff up can do it for themselves. For instance, in the book, they'll learn how you can go to Google and type in just the title, The Most Approved Plan. You might want to add Thomas Jefferson to that. And then only click on the article that is on official U.S. government websites, right? And you will read where in the 1700s, Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, now we're designing a great seal. We've signed the Declaration of Independence. We need a capital city for this new nation. And so they advertised a designing challenge, a contest. And so any architectural firms in the United States, across Europe, France, whatever, that wanted to participate, you could, pitch your plan for how this capital city is going to be laid out. So they get all these different submissions. But if you read the article on a U.S. government website, The Most Approved Plan, it says, but at the end of the day, Thomas Jefferson rejected all of the plans. Why? It answers the question, and it literally says this, because he wanted the U.S. capital city to be designed according to the old Roman pantheon and dedicated to all pagan gods. That's what it says on the U.S. government website, dedicated to all pagan gods. Well, once you know that, then this Atlantean scheme makes sense. They wanted an occult democracy that's working with the gods. Go inside the U.S. Capitol Dome, look up. What do you see? The 4,400 or 4,664 square foot famous painting by Italian painter Constantino Brumidi called The Apotheosis of George Washington. Apotheosis means to become a god. What god is he becoming? Again, Freemasons, Walt Whitman, they all said he's becoming Osiris, which is the Greek version of Apollo. The Egyptian version of Apollo. He's becoming the Osiris of the afterlife. But look at the heaven that he is rising up into. There's not a single Christian symbol there. Jesus isn't there. Michael the Archangel isn't there. There's no Bible sitting on the arm of the throne that, that Washington is sitting on as he's rising up into the heavens. He is literally surrounded by pagan gods and demons. But what are they doing? Like there's one of the images in that painting that shows Isis dragging the transatlantic telegraph cable. So she's playing her role. She's part of the Atlantean scheme. She's helping us with the development of our country. You look at other images and that same thing just goes on and on and on. And so look down below that painting. Well, maybe we'll get into that in a moment, or maybe even on a different program. 72 pentagrams. The U.S. Capitol Dome is literally a Antichrist version of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. If we have time, I will explain that. But anyway, what Thomas Jefferson wanted is what we built. And that's why when you visit Washington, D.C., and you walk out into the mall and you're observing the domed pregnant belly of Isis that is sitting right behind you, you look this direction, and what do you see? The largest obelisk of its kind in the world, 6.666 inches high, 6.66 inches long, each line at the perimeter of the base. It has a Bible bound inside a magic 666 square, which is used for binding. Not only binding influences you don't want to affect the nation, but for calling on the second coming of Apollo. Benjamin Franklin, who we talked about last week, even made his own magic squares for invoking the second coming of these entities. Now, all of the layout of Washington, D.C. is based on the myth of Osiris, and I'll give this to you very quickly. What does that have to do with anything? Okay, the myth of Osiris, the most famous ancient Egyptian myth, was that Osiris's evil brother Set was jealous of him, and guess what he did? He conspired with 72 ruffians to murder Osiris. They chop him into 14 pieces. They throw the pieces into the Nile River. His sister wife Isis searches the banks of the Nile River So she recovers 13 pieces. The part she can't find is his missing male organ. So she takes and puts his body back together magically. I don't know if she's stitching with thread, but she puts his corpse back together. And then she creates a magic obelisk, and she affixes it to his ithyphallic corpse in place of his male organ. And then she conducts the very first raising of Osiris ceremony. She calls forth the seed of Osiris to rise up through the magic obelisk, emit into her belly. She becomes pregnant. She gives birth to Horus, which is the son of Osiris, or the second coming of Osiris, Osiris in flesh. Now, that myth formed the most important of all cosmology all throughout ancient Egypt. And therefore, everywhere you went, if there was a temple, whether it was Amun-Ra, whatever it was, there would be the dome belly of Isis and an obelisk standing in the courtyard on the outside representing that magic. In fact, so important was this that during a festival called Opet. Now, by the way, this is really important and even timely because Egypt, the nation of Egypt, has just announced that they are going to revive the ancient festival of Opet, in which the gods are taken on barges up the Nile River to the temple of Amun-Ra in Karnak, which represented exactly where the pharaoh would go at the inauguration of every new pharaoh. You'd put him on the barge with those gods. He's going up the barge on his way to the largest temple facility ever built. The laity are walking on both sides of the Nile River, and they're celebrating, and they're actually calling on these gods to do favors for them. They're reenacting parts of the Osiris-Isis myth. Finally, he arrives there. He disembarks. He goes inside the ever-pregnant belly of Isis, and as he's standing in there looking out at the obelisk on the outside, he is surrounded by the magicians of Egypt, and they conduct the raising of Osiris ceremony. Don't forget, the book of Exodus tells us these guys had very powerful occult power. They could mimic almost every miracle that was performed during the Exodus. So they call for the seed of Osiris, come up through the obelisk in the courtyard, emit into the belly of Isis where Pharaoh is standing, and Pharaoh is transmogrified. He goes into the temple of Isis a man, he comes out, he is the Horus, he is the Osiris, he is God in flesh. And Egypt celebrates because they have divine representation. Now, fast forward to today, I know I'm going to run out of time. At the inauguration of every American president, what is being reenacted? They are conducting, the modern Egyptian magicians are conducting the raising of Osiris ceremony while the president is reenacting everything that happened in ancient Egypt that was supposed to incarnate the god Osiris, who the Greeks would call Apollo. Now, why should Americans, and why should Christians in particular, care about that? Because the prophecy on the Great Seal of the United States of America is derived from the prophecies, the mottos are derived from the prophecies of the ancient Kume Sibyl, who was the most powerful of the Sibylline oracles for Apollo, if you will. It would predict the future, in which she foresaw that when the Novus Ordo Seclorum arrived, while his father usurps the authority of the God of the Bible up in the heavens, Jupiter, Saturn, which is on the front side of the Great Seal of the United States, while his father is doing that, on earth, Apollo is born and takes his role as the head of the new order of the ages, what we call the New World Order.